Hi, Justin.
Hey Heather, how are you doing?
I'm really good. How are you?
I'm awesome. So this is my first podcast ever.
Yay. And look at you. You're all
So
official. You've even got your like pop filter thingy.
yeah, I know, right? It looks like I know what I'm doing.
It's true. What do you have in your hand though?
Oh, this is my out of season dinosaur that I refuse to. It does not leave my microphone, my mic stand.
All right then. Commitment.
It's yeah. Um.
I have a little glow in the dark Pegasi. Does that count?
Yeah, no, that definitely
Right?
counts.
Because that's kind of cute. And it's important that it's glow in the dark because
Right. I get scared when the power goes out and stuff, so I need things that glow as well.
all right then. I'll remember that.
Yeah.
So
um.
we should probably introduce ourselves for people who don't listen to CraftLit.
Right. So I'll go first. I'm the sort of behind the scenes audio troll that takes Heather's audio and turns it into CraftLit every week for the last year plus a few months.
Yeah, it's been a
And
year and a couple.
she's been so lovely to work with. I was like, hey, let's start another podcast because we both don't have enough projects to be juggling around. But this one sounds really cool. So
Yeah, we both thought I think the same thing at the same time. So I'm Heather Ordover, and I've been hosting CraftLit Podcast since 2006. Actually, today is the 11-year anniversary of hosting CraftLit, which is one of the reasons why we decided to start it today. Yay! So brave new podcast for not terribly brave, very old podcast. It's a way to celebrate it. There have only been a few times when I've been brave on CraftLit, but for those of you who haven't ever listened to CraftLit before, I used to teach high school English in Southern California and in New York City, and I loved teaching the books that people said couldn't be taught anymore, the old ones. And and when I was home with my second son, I was bored and really missed teaching and really missed my students and especially missed the books. And I thought, geez, a lot of the people who I was talking to at the time, because this was just after 9/11 in New York City, were knitting. See, I even have it here.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you can't hold a book while you're knitting or gardening or doing the dishes or vacuuming or any of those things. So I thought, wouldn't it be great if you could listen to the audiobook while you were doing something else, but also have the benefit of basically audio cliffs notes.
Yeah.
So I provide the audio cliffs notes.
This sounds like it needs an infomercial type trailer of like, are you trying to read and do the dishes and be like, oh, book in the sink? Then boy, do we have a show for you. You can listen to your books and they
Right?
can be annotated too.
See, I need you to create one of these for me because I've been saying there is nothing sexy about
We can
classic fiction.
we can definitely set that up.
I love
I
it.
right. I'm jotting this down. Imaginary
Oh, good.
typewriter.
Excellent. Excellent. Because it's the same thing that we have decided to do with 1984 and Brave New World and the less read, but at least equally as important Eric Hoffer's book called The True Believer. But all of the books that we've been doing on CraftLit, and Justin's been with me for pretty much the whole ride on Count of Monte Cristo. We're almost 2/3 of the way through the book. And it's been a year.
Right. That's a honker.
I have.
Do you have
I do. I have my
the
tome.
foot crusher laying around?
I do. I really do. Because here, this is how far we are. This is how much we have left, is the top part. We've
Lord.
done all of that.
Oh, man.
Right? I know, because that
I
is a
know.
honkin' big old book right there. But
Yeah,
it's awesome, and it's just getting
it
awesomer.
is.
But since Count of Monte Cristo is public domain because it's old, and 1984 Brave New World and The True Believer aren't. Justin and I had to come up with some way to work around that problem. And so what we've decided to do is we're going to have an A side and a B side to each episode. So this is episode 1A, where we will pre-hash the chapter for you to listen to. And then there will be a break. And then we will start a completely different live stream. And that will be the B side. And that will be the post hash of the chapter where we clean up any misconceptions and talk about the stuff that we couldn't talk about beforehand because spoilers, and get you ready for the next week. That means that you can go off in between the A side and the B side and listen to the audiobook version. There's an excellent one over at audible.com. Many people get them from their library. Now there's OneDrive, and there's another. Is it Hoopla? I think is one of the free
Yeah,
apps
I think. Mm-hmm.
from libraries, so you can pick it up free that way, or you can, of course, read it on paper, which is
Right. Paper, my preferred way, you know.
I know we have matching books so that our
We do.
page numbers would match.
Right. You have more sticky notes in yours than mine. I've been just kind of
do.
like leaving it open.
Is yours
Like
is the
constantly
spine
on
on
my
yours
desk.
starting to crackle?
Not too bad, honestly.
I had to tape mine. Mine
The
has like
beginning
Scotch
is,
tape all over it.
hey, those are reading battle scars. It's a real thing.
Yeah,
For
it's like
books.
commitment. Mine has writing in it too, but that's
Oh
how
yeah, mine's.
it's how I know that the person who had mine before didn't actually read any of the critical essays at the end.
Yeah, well, that's a shame. That's where the good stuff is.
It is. So speaking of
Good stuff. What kind of good
all the
stuff
good
are you
stuff,
gonna get into? I guess we're
we
both taking it from different angles, you and I, but
well, why don't you? Because
yeah.
now everybody knows that I used to teach high school English. I was actually a theater major, but I went back to school and got all of my English credits so that I could teach something useful. But, but you are more recently out of college than I am. So what did you study when you were in school?
I studied psychology. I got my bachelor's of science at the College of Charleston in psych, and I'm sort of an all-around nerd, and I particularly like the sort of scary side of science fiction, which these books fall into pretty hard, I would say.
Yeah.
And so the way that I'm kind of going to be looking at the book is more along the lines of sort of like modern tie-ins and sort of the dark kind of not so happy side of the way culture interacts with technologies as they continue to evolve. And I mean, the stuff we have now would be pure nightmare fuel for Orwell,
Oh yeah.
for sure. But so I've got a lot of interesting articles and research pulled up that we're gonna chat about.
Oh good.
So yeah, very very scary. All right, and never mind. We'll get to it later.
Are you going to start scaring me already? Is that what
Right.
it's? Yeah.
Yeah,
know,
I've
you
got a
don't
great
have to.
story, but I'll let you go first.
Okay.
So
I can scare people slightly less. Well,
Mhm.
it's an interesting and I think important point that propelled both of us, I think, to this inevitable end that we decided to start the podcast because it was clear from newspaper stories and things like that that 1984 was selling out in bookstores all
Mhm.
of a sudden in November last year, and um, I went back and I read it again. I read it when I was in high school, and which was, by the way, 1984. I read it the last week of for the second time, the last week of 1984. I graduated in 85, so I'm old. But uh, it was very interesting because that was a very different time. That was right in the middle of Reagan. It was a very different vibe in the world. At the time, it was during the Cold War. Um, my parents were baby boomers, early baby boomers, so if 46 and 48, and my grandparents were very young, so I heard lots of stories about during the war, and Orwell's world felt very old-fashioned to me, and it stayed that way for a really long time, and then it started feeling not so old-fashioned as it did relevant, because
Mhm.
not because the visual that I have in my mind suddenly became modern, because it didn't, but because not the ideas or concepts, but the things that Orwell was wrestling with and that tie in directly to Justin what you were saying, the modern and especially the technology and things like that. In really weird ways, Orwell really predicted some creepy stuff. And people always talk about the telescreens and stuff like that, but it goes way beyond that. And I know you've pulled out some research on that. So so that was my certainly my impetus for wanting to do this, was trying to figure out a way to tackle a book that is not in the public domain and do it in an interesting way. And I didn't want to do it by myself. And then we
Yeah.
started talking, and that was great.
So I came to the rescue. Dun, dun, dun,
You did.
dun.
You did. You were my knight. It was so good. So one of the things, go ahead, because I have to pick up another book.
Oh, well, I was just gonna say, so yeah, it's kind of interesting how sort of like pervasive a lot of things are in 1984, particularly. Kind of, it's really associated with sort of surveillance, and so part of when we first started talking about this, my friend is starting up at a college, and he was supposed to go to some open house, and his mom was texting him nonstop, like, "Are you there? Are you there? Who are you talking to?" And he was lying about being there because we were watching like cartoons or something stupid on the Saturday. And she sent him a picture from a live stream of the event from a webcam on the school campus, and like zoomed in, circled him, and
What?
texted it to him and said, "Is this you?" And he was like, "Oh my gosh." And it got me thinking, like, there are so many systems in place that you just like forget about, that you could be watched from, really anywhere. Like that
Wow.
school probably threw up that webcam. You can see the same thing for like weather webcams. Like a lot of campuses have stuff set up outside that are just constantly running. You just never think about.
It's like the eaglets that that video that's watching the bald eagle family, except not so
Yeah,
fun.
right. And so, I mean, that's part of one of the things that really made me be like, yeah, I really kind of want to dive into this more. Because we were
Wow.
talking about it. My poor friend, he was just like, "Oh man, talk about helicopter parent."
Yeah. Yeah, that's like the nth level. I mean, I understand. I really do understand both sides of the cell phone thing. Like parents of teenagers who are still living at home, who are still in high school,
Hmm.
they have like the low jack on their kid's phone, which I get. For two reasons. One is because even though I was a really responsible, good kid, at least I thought I was really responsible. We can talk to my parents about it. I have no idea. I thought I was a good kid. Um, I know there were times when I said, "Oh, okay, I'm going to go to a party. I'm going to go see friends," and I forgot to call when I got there because all of a sudden it's people and stuff, and so I
Right.
forgot to give them the address. And by the time I get home, they're like, "Where were you? We didn't know. I mean, we knew you were going to be out, but we didn't know where, and we were really worried." And I felt horrible. And in cases like that, it would have been great if they could have just, looked and seen, "Oh, she's over at Amy's house. It's fine." Um, but on the other hand, it's really hard to buy surprise birthday presents for your parents if you've been low-jacked.
True.
So I go back and forth on that. But the watching the school's live feed and
Yeah.
checking in with your college-age
With
child
your
seems a
college,
little,
yeah, mid 20s now. So
oh my God.
I
Yeah.
know.
That's a little creepy. And that is certainly not um not within the world that we're about to step into in any of the books that we're talking about. And in fact,
Hmm.
it even goes into David Brin's book, Earth, which I think I have a copy of back there, um, where he had tried to do a predictive book. See, I think he wrote it in 1990, and he tried to do 50 years in the future, which is really hard because he's a science guy, so he's trying to do real science. And 50 years in the future is not that far off. So you have to think about the technology that you have now and then predict how far can it go, and then how will that affect society, and which direction will that drive new technology. And he came up with some stuff that I thought, well, he predicted Google Glass.
Oh.
And it's used very interestingly in his book because everybody my age, we're all the crotchety old folks, and on our glasses, which were called True View, TRUVUE, True View goggles, we had cameras, and those cameras fed directly into the police department. So
Oh,
we would
wow.
sit on park benches and watch all those young whippersnappers, and as a consequence, there's no crime.
Right.
But it's a weird kind of surveillance state. It's a
Mm-hmm.
almost creepier in some ways surveillance state.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. But that whole informing on your neighbors kind of thing is something that we are going to get into pretty
Yes,
pretty
very much
directly.
so.
So, one of the things that we do on CraftLit is kind of preset readers for terminology that they're going to wind up hitting, or um, information that is archaic that we just don't carry around with us anymore. And if you don't know it, you either don't get a joke or you don't get something important that's coming up in the book. Um, and the first one, especially for Americans, that I think is going to be tricky is ingsoc, which
Yes.
if you're reading it yourself on paper, you might not even get the audible cue that ingsoc is English socialism, because it's spelled ing, not eng.
Right.
And importantly, and we'll thread biographical information on Orwell and Aldous Huxley and Eric Hoffer through all of these instead of doing a big brain dump for you guys. But um, George Orwell, who was originally named Eric Blair, Orwell was his pen name. He was a socialist, and he was a socialist for some really interesting reasons. He did not grow up in Britain. He grew up, I don't even know if he was in India the whole time, but his family was working in the East for the British monarchy government. So he started as a socialist. He was very much a socialist, and that's interesting because the way we throw the word socialism around in the United States is not what he's talking about. It's not what he talked about. It's not what it resembles ingsoc very
Okay.
little. And it resembles socialism really little. Yeah. So we'll get more into that as we go along. But ingsoc is English socialism, and for the first chapter in the book, that's pretty much all you need to know. There's also references to some things that are very much a World War II thing, like boiled cabbage. Have you ever had boiled cabbage cooked nearby?
No. Well, yes. We're not going to get into that story. It also involves helicopter parent friend cooking a lot of food at once, and yeah, no, it's bad. Not a fan.
No, no. It's got a fairly pungent smell.
Right.
Yeah, boiled cabbage is not something that when you walk in the door, you're going to go, "Wow, we get boiled cabbage again?"
Yeah. Or leave it in the refrigerator for, several weeks, pushed in the back in a open container.
No.
Um,
No, it smells much better when it's fermented and called sauerkraut.
right.
That's a big
There's
improvement.
that.
So boiled cabbage is one of those things. Sanguine is somebody who is sanguine is somebody who, in the face of something that looks like it might not work out quite so well, they're pretty laid back about it and pretty chill, and not overly flustered. So that's sanguine. And then I've got a picture for blue bottle.
bottles.
So I didn't somehow I have never called this a blue bottle, the fly,
Mm-hmm.
but that is it's what I think of as a housefly, but it's not. These are bigger. I mean, that's a pretty big looking fly. They're bigger, and they're mentioned by name out of all the things that you could mention by name in the book. Orwell mentions blue bottles. So,
Right.
Pig iron. I thought pig iron was really interesting.
Yeah, I had to look that up on the wiki there.
Yeah, and it is It is an iron ingot, basically, that is tempered with other alloys, and it makes it a little bit easier to carry around. And that
Mm-hmm.
is just a lousy. Let me see if I can get in closer. And the way that they create these is to dig trenches in sand, and then these little arms going off of those trenches get you these little ingots, like you can see here. And by little, I mean they're probably 6 or 8 inches.
Right.
But they all look like, when they're still in the sand, they look like baby pigs coming off their mother when they're suckling. And so that's why it was
How
called pig iron.
cute. Yeah.
Isn't that? I mean, that's like a real thing. I
Yeah.
didn't know that. And I've read pig iron come across a lot in older books, and I never bothered to look it up before now. So, gin. Gin is described as oily. Justin, when was the
Mm-hmm.
last time you had gin?
It was mixed with some tonic, and it was probably a few weeks ago.
Well played. You're also in warmer
Right.
climate, so a gin and tonic
Sure.
is more appropriate. Yeah, I remember from 8th grade when I read this the first time that this description of the gin being oily really bugged me.
Yeah, it reads a little weird.
And it comes
I
up
think.
over and over again, described that
Mm-hmm.
way. Um, and I haven't ever thought of gin as oily, but I also haven't. I don't think I've ever had gin straight,
Right. I mean, it's described as a sickly, oily smell as of Chinese rice spirit.
which would be not ouzo. That's Greek. What is the? Oh my gosh, I cannot remember. Sake. No, that's
Sake.
Japanese. That's not Chinese.
Right.
Well, he could have gotten it wrong too.
Perhaps.
Or maybe we have to find out what Chinese rice spirit is and try some next time we live stream.
Either way, you shouldn't drink as much of it as Winston does in the book. Per my recommendation, and perhaps his as well, if he could talk to you.
If
If
so, he also describes it. See, he is the gin. It's oily, and it hits your stomach like nitric acid, which is a corrosive acid that can be used to oxidize things. So probably not what you want in your stomach.
no.
Yeah. They talk about how old phones work, and I went looking for some photographs, and I had the best time finding these pictures. Because there are a lot from movies and
Mm-hmm.
of these old switchboards. This one is more modern, and I know my mom was alive when Catalina Island in Southern California was the last place that you had these kind of switchboard exchanges where you'd pick up the phone and ask to
Really?
be connected. Yeah. So Southern California, all of that had already dropped it, but it was well into the 60s. I may have even been born before they completely trashed it. But that was one picture that I really liked, and then, of course, that's kind of the
Mm-hmm.
traditional. But those are quarter-inch plugs, kind of like, old school headphone jacks,
Right.
that were, I mean, it's a sturdy kind of plugging sound
Yeah,
that you
it's
get.
satisfying to plug that kind of thing in.
Right? I love
Um,
that. I always thought that was really
yeah.
fun. Oh, those were the only 2 I got. So that was it's fun because he talks about plugging in wires, and if you don't know what that means, then you're
Right.
gonna get confused, and I think that's one of the things that happens with some of these old books is you hit something like that, and it throws you because it doesn't register right away, and then you're distracted by that, and
Glaze
and the
over.
yeah, and the book
Mhm.
keeps going, and your brain is still stuck on the problem. So that's certainly one of the reasons um, why I wanted to look that one up. I had a question for you, though, because I don't know the answer, and you are down in tobacco country.
Mhm.
Do you know how cigarette tobacco stays in a cigarette?
No, I do not.
I have not been able to find that information yet. I'm hoping at some point we will be able to locate that because he does talk about lifting up cigarettes, their particular brand of cigarette that the party has, and all the tobacco falling out.
Victory cigarettes.
Victory
I
cigarettes.
was actually going to. I couldn't find a empty pack. I was going to write victory cigarettes on and pull it out at this part real casually, but I
and do
failed.
product placement for.
Right, exactly. I'm sure that they're appropriately taxed in this region.
I'd been wondering if that was one of the reasons why tobacco why they add tar to the tobacco, was to get it stickier. But as I recall, when we saw a working farm demonstration in Northern Virginia, there's a colonial farm that you could go to, and they grow tobacco because that's one of the crops that would have been grown there. And those leaves seemed to me to already be kind of sticky. But I imagine that it's either indicating that the tobacco is being cut with something that is not tobacco, like lettuce,
perhaps, like,
or it's just such inferior quality that there's no resin or whatever it is that's makes the stuff sticky in the first place.
Stick, right?
I don't know. Either way, it was of note, and the cigarettes I know get talked about several times in the book. So the next one that is totally archaic, we just don't use these things anymore, more's the pity, is
the pen holder.
The pen holder. And it threw me, even though I have pens like this, it threw me that he talked about a pen holder and ink, because he didn't talk about a pen stand or an ink stand. It's a pen holder and ink. And so I went online and I looked, and it's just a divot in the chunk of wood.
Yeah.
And that's removable or replaceable inkwell. And then that's another place to hold your pen vertically. But that one is a more traditional pen holder, not what he's talking about. This one, though, I thought was great. And I know it's super crazy small, but this one I loved because it's pour the ink in, and then you have 2 divots on each side for places you can put your pen. And then this one I thought was just beautiful.
Yeah, it's pretty classy.
Yeah, right? And it even has a little dippy place where you can kind of clean off if you have blops of ink on the nib, you can clean them off in those little divots. And again, it's pour your ink in, or you buy a bottle of ink that fits into the well there. But that was what he was talking about when he mentions picking up a pen holder and ink. 1984 is the name of the book. 40 years before 1984 would have been 1944, which is closer. Now, there's a whole lot of discussion about why he named it 1984, because originally that wasn't what he named it. He went back and forth around things, but I think ultimately he finished the book in 1948 and then inverted the numbers. But he'd been playing around with the 80s for a while. He never went to like 2000 because that was too crazy. But that's where it's kind of like catch-22. We use catch-22 like it's an actual term, but it's really something that was made up because he wanted to do catch-11, and his publisher said that doesn't sound very good.
Right.
Pick another number. What about catch-13? No, that doesn't work either. What about catch-22?
Yeah, that works. Double it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the reasons why these things that become so iconic, the reason why they were born sometimes is just ridiculous. I need to give everybody a heads up. There are going to be Jewish slurs throughout the book. But I think that has less to do with kind of a Dickensian anti-Jewish stance and more of a anti-orthodoxy stance in general.
Yes.
Because he wasn't a fan of Catholics. He wasn't a fan of anybody who followed blindly, or what he would perceive as following blindly.
Right. If you pay attention to the way that, prayer is referenced, and specifically who is, in what direction it's being prayed toward, you can maybe catch on to some of that, I would say.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I've been reading, I've been reading actually essays by Christopher Hitchens on George Orwell. He's a huge fan of George Orwell. And he talks about the fact that Orwell recognized his flaws, his personal flaws, his personal personality flaws. He recognized them. He knew what they were. He knew more or less where they came from. And many of those things that he considered flaws, he worked to overcome. And his innate distrust of Jews was one of those things, which I thought was fascinating.
Right.
Because the mind somebody has to have to be able to go, you know what, I'm really kind of biased. I should stop that.
Yeah. It takes a bit to be able to step back and pull those things out of yourself.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I think it's one of the reasons why 1984 works as well as it does, as both a cautionary tale and just a piece of fiction. And I know some people have had, there have been reviews, but there have also been just conversations that I've had with people sometimes, and they're not huge fans. They say, "Oh, I liked Animal Farm better," and then everybody laughs and says, "You like it because it's shorter."
Sure.
But 1984 is yeah. 1984 isn't a particularly long book either. It's
No.
just more, it's more depressed.
No, it's definitely more depressed.
Yeah. There's some stuff in Animal Farm that's just fun, and some stuff in Animal Farm that just, he has to make it go faster to hit you harder.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in 1984, he has to take his time to hit you harder. And I think that's the main thing, is if you don't sense the tension building in 1984 because it's going slowly, then you will miss the punch. But that's what we're here for. So
Right.
that makes it fun. And I think that's everything I wanted to give people a heads up on before they go off and read the chapter. Did you have anything else you wanted to throw in there? Things
I don't think so. Just prepare for some sad stuff. Like, it's, it kind of jumps right into it. It's not like
Oh, that's
doesn't
right.
start off very happy.
No, it is in fact one of the most famous openings. I totally forgot to mention this. Thank you. It's one of the most famous opening lines in literature. There are many, right? There's "Call me Ishmael,"
Mm-hmm.
which people often misunderstand, thinking that that is his name is Ishmael, instead of knowing their Bible and knowing that there was Isaac and Ishmael, and Isaac was the accepted son and Ishmael was the outcast son. And so by saying "Call me Ishmael," it's not his name. You're saying, call me Ishmael because I'm the loser. I'm the one who gets kicked out. I'm the one who doesn't
Mm-hmm.
belong. And that changes everything in the book. In 1984, there's a similar problem with the opening line. He will talk about a clock. When he talks about the clock, he is not talking about military time. Lots of people on the internet will tell you he's talking about military time. He's not talking about military time. He is talking about things being fundamentally wrong.
Yep.
Because it was a saying back then and for hundreds of years before, because we've had clocks around for mad long time, yo.
Yeah. Time.
Yeah. So from the get-go, something is really, really fundamentally wrong with the world that he's in. And by the end of the chapter, you know that it is really a depressing place to live in. But somehow, and this is why he's such a good writer, it's still compelling enough that you want to keep reading and find out, like, well, now what? Because he lays out almost everything that became iconic in the book is mentioned or touched upon in the first chapter. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's really, really well done exposition all the way through this first chapter. But yeah, that first line, that's one not to misunderstand. I think that's it.
Cautious eyebrow raise.
Yes, I know. Ironically cautious, cautiously ironic.
Yeah. Gosh.
Yeah, the ironic eyebrow. My kids get mad at me when I do that. They're like, "Put the eyebrow down, Mom.
Put the eyebrow.
You don't get to be ironic about this."
Yeah, chill those things out.
Yeah. Give it a rest. All right, so we can let everybody go and listen to and or read the first chapter. If people have already listened to or read the first chapter, you can hang out. On the CraftLit channel, we have a 1B live stream that's showing up, and it'll be a completely different link. I will go and share it out on Facebook and Twitter and things like that. And then at the end of the B side, we will explain how to listen to the rest of the podcast.
That's right.
All righty. So go read, go listen, go have fun. Go have fun.
Go have
Go have a drink.
Go have a good drink. Yeah, go find you some oily gin.
That's right.
About
That's
a
right.
teacup full.
Oh man, you know what? We should do that sometime. Is bring gin.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll go get a bottle on our break.
Right.
All right, and we'll see you back on the flip side at 11:30 Eastern.
That's right.
All
right here.
Stop the broadcast now. Bye.